Welcome to the Austrian province of Carinthia. Today we're going to try some of the most famous dishes of the region. The most famous dish you can find in Carinthia is probably this here. These are dumplings called Kärntnernudeln, and the ones you'll find in the restaurants the most are Kärntner Käsenudeln. They're filled with curd cheese, potatoes, mint, and other seasonings. These dumplings were already mentioned in the late 15th century by the private secretary of the vicar from Udine. He traveled through Carinthia, tried these, and described them as very tasty pasta dishes. Okay, let's move to our second one. This is the dessert version of Kärntnernudeln. It's also quite traditional, and the filling is, let's clean this up a little bit, dried pears and curd cheese, and of course cinnamon to round it up. So these are the traditional ones, but of course nowadays people tend to experiment too, and we found a really interesting place in Völkermarkt, not far from here, Klagenfurter, where they create their modern versions or their evolved versions of Kärntnernudeln, and they call them Carintini. So Arian went there and checked the place out.
So, Siggy, could you tell me a little bit about the history of Carintini's in this local area, please?
Well, Carintini, they come from this well-known Käsenudel. In Carinthia, we have the tradition to fill and to stuff the dough with ricotta mostly and with mint. And they are well known nearly all over Austria. But I wanted to go a step further. And I said to myself, well, we have a very well-known and historic food in Austria. So my idea was to have all that specialities and to make them very, very tiny, so that you have a whole menu and 5 or 6 course menu on one plate. And then you can decide, what do you want to have? How do you want to fill up yourself with Tafelspitz or with Zwiebelrostbraten or whatsoever, and you don't have to take a full portion of it. So one side topic about our Carinthia noodle is that we cultivated the style to close the dough, the dumpling, so to say. We call it, as you can see, Krendeln. Krendeln is not more than closing the two parts of the dough, but also in that case we started our own technique and invented a new form. So as you can see, they look like a small rose. And the fine thing about it is that if you put the butter on it, the butter wouldn't spill over around, it doesn't run away, it's kept on the dumpling, so to say. So you have the taste permanently.
So if you want to get an idea of the sort of variety that Siggy offers with his dumplings, we can show you right now what is actually in his freezer. So to give you an idea, there's actually a mix of both sweet and savory sort of mixes. So for example, you have this one over here, which is crispy pork, which is going to be one of my favorites because I love meat. But I do like vegetarian and vegan food as well, I've got to say. This one I think is a bit more open to vegans and vegetarians, that's linseed.
Right.
So yeah, that one, so that would be lentils.
Well, we have 35 different tastes and different noodles, and we developed into gluten-free.
What amazes me about this variety, Siggy, is that there's actually something for everybody over here. Whether you're carnivorous, whether you're vegan, vegetarian, whether you've got a sweet tooth, whether you're more for savory, there is something for everybody over here. And what amazes me as well is that you take something that's quite well known around the world, like all around Austria, a particular type of meal, and you basically condense it into something small as a dumpling, and it's not only satisfying, it's filling, it's delicious, and it was fantastic. Really,
so
hats off to you.
If you want to show somebody Carinthia or Austria, you can put it on a plate.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So now it's time to show you a few typical Carinthian desserts. So we've bought a few things from farmers markets and bakeries, and probably the most well-known cake in all of Carinthia is the Camehl. It's a yeast cake filled with cinnamon and raisins. In the past, it used to be made in a rein, or pot in English, but nowadays it's mostly baked in gugelhupf molds. So let's put this one back and take a look at our second candidate. It's called Carinthia. It's the little brother or sister of Camehl. It's also a yeast cake that is filled with cinnamon and sugar, and sometimes, as with this one, with jam. So the only disadvantage of this cake is that it's quite sticky, so be prepared and bring some tissues. Here's the juicy, sticky filling. A cinnamon goodness. And since we're in the south of Carinthia, we'd like to show you a specialty from the area, which is buckwheat flour. In the local dialect, it's called Hatenmehl. The legend behind this one is that the Tartars from Siberia, now Russia, brought buckwheat to Austria and also to Carinthia. Since they were not Christians, the locals called them heathens, and Haten means heathen in English. So nowadays, the buckwheat flour is still used for various desserts. Here we have a Swiss roll filled with the traditional apricot jam. Here we have a big cookie. It's also quite traditional here, filled with probably red currant jam. And this is something that's a bit more modern. It's buckwheat crisps or chips. Crunchy. These are all desserts we can recommend to you.